Okay, so what looks like a simple story about bad exam results is actually a detective story. It's about what we're really teaching our kids and what we're really testing. Let's get into it.
It all kicks off with this really alarming question. In 2025, exam scores for high school students all across Ghana just took a nosedive. The first thought, of course, was that students were just performing worse than ever. But what if that wasn't the real story at all?
So, to really get the sense of panic, you have to understand the exam itself. It's called the West African Senior School Certificate Examination, or wassce for short. And look, this isn't just any test. It's a massive, high-stakes exam that literally determines university admission for students in several West African countries. And in 2025, the results sent a shockwave across the nation.
And we're not talking about a minor dip here. The official body that runs the test, the West African Examinations Council, actually used the phrase worrying surge to describe the failure rate. This was across the board: English, math, science, social studies, you name it. Kids were failing in way bigger numbers than the year before. The whole system seemed like it was in crisis.
But right as the public outcry was getting louder and louder, a really prominent educationist, Professor Stephen Adere, stepped forward. And he offered a completely different take on it. He basically suggested that everyone was looking at the problem from the wrong angle. So get this, here's the core of his argument. He said, hey, the results don't mean students are doing worse, it means the results are finally honest. The key, he said, wasn't about the students' performance at all, it was about better supervision. His logic was actually pretty simple but really powerful. For years, he argued, widespread cheating had been artificially pumping up the wassce scores. But in 2025, they finally cracked down with stricter supervision during the exams. That's called invigilation. So the scores didn't suddenly get worse, they just got real. This wasn't a new failure being created, it was an old one being exposed. And this is where the story gets so much bigger. According to Professor Ade, these honest results weren't the real problem. They were just a symptom, the tip of the iceberg of a much deeper crisis that starts way, way before students ever sit down for a high school exam.
He points to this concept from the World Bank called schooling without learning, and it is a chillingly accurate phrase. It describes a system where, kids are in class every day. They're getting promoted from grade to grade, but they aren't actually learning the basic, fundamental skills they absolutely need.
He says it all starts at the primary level, where the foundation is just weak. Students are just pushed along from one grade to the next in what he calls a wholesale promotion system, even if they haven't mastered the material. And the result? You end up with students who are, and this is his phrase, functionally illiterate at the basic level. Now this raises a huge question, right? If so many students are getting to their final exams without a solid foundation, how on earth have they been passing all this time, even with the cheating? And what are these huge, life-changing exams actually designed to measure? And that brings us to the second big piece of our puzzle. Because it turns out, an academic study from back in 2023 did a deep dive into the exam questions themselves, and what they uncovered is absolutely fascinating. Researchers took a bunch of past wassce physics exams and analyzed them using this framework called Bloom's taxonomy. Now, don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. It's basically just a way of categorizing different levels of thinking, from just simple memorization all the way up to complex problem solving. Think of it like this. Bloom's taxonomy splits thinking into two big buckets. You've got your lower order skills, that's stuff like remembering dates, recalling facts, just understanding a definition. Then you have higher order skills, and that's the good stuff, applying what you know to a new problem, analyzing it, and maybe even creating a new solution. And here's the kicker. The conclusion of the research was pretty stark. The wassce questions they looked at weren't balanced at all. Nope, they were overwhelmingly designed to test lower order thinking skills. Basically, memorization. You can see the imbalance so clearly here. The exams were fantastic at testing if a student could remember and understand information. But when it came to applying knowledge, or analyzing a problem, or creating something new, the skills you actually need in the real world, those questions were almost non-existent. The whole system was rewarding memorization, not critical thinking. So now we've got these two huge pieces of the puzzle, right? On one side, you have a student population with a really weak educational foundation, and on the other, you have a national test that mostly just rewards memorizing facts. When you put those two things together, you start to see how the whole system was just propped up like a house of cards. It's a vicious cycle. First, students get to high school without a strong foundation. Then, they face exams that reward cramming, not real understanding. This opens the door for them to pass by either memorizing things last minute or, even easier, by cheating.
For years, this whole setup just masked the real crisis. But in 2025, when the cheating was finally stopped, the whole fragile structure came crashing down.
So, the main takeaway here is pretty huge. The 2025 results weren't some sudden new crisis. They were an overdue, painful dose of reality. They finally pulled back the curtain on a system where schooling without learning was being hidden by a testing culture that valued remembering things over actually knowing them. And all of that leaves us with the ultimate exam question. And it's not for the students, it's for the educators and policymakers. If you want to build a system that creates real, deep learning, where do you even start? Do you fix the test first, so it rewards critical thinking? Or do you have to go all the way back and fix the teaching from the ground up? Or maybe you just can't fix one without the other.